The knife is a Spyderco Endela K390. This was a model that I saw coming and I was interested in. It was originally released in VG10 steel, and I wanted to wait for a better steel offering than VG10. When I saw it coming in K390, I knew that I would pick one up. The Endela is a step between the Endura and the Delica, and it had my interest just based off how much I enjoy the Endura and Delica as carry options, especially the Endura. The steel is K390. That steel's been widely discussed on this channel, tested, demonstrated, discussed, and it's been discussed in a lot of other places as well. I don't think I need to spend too much time on K390 for the sake of K390. What I will say is it's a high carbide, high hardness tool steel, heavy in vanadium carbide. Consequently, I see performance from K390 that I very much enjoy. In particular, I see high edge retention of front-end sharpness, which seems to be what has my attention at this point. In the past, a lot of the testing that I've done has been quantitative, looking at when the knife would stop shaving hair. And what I have found over the last 6 months to a year is that what I'm more concerned with, just for myself, my own personal point of focus, is edge retention of front-end sharpness. Hair whittling edge, how long will it last? How long will that very high level of sharpness stick around just through regular carry? K390 seems to do that very, very well. Better than I'm seeing with S90V or M390 or other options. So I enjoy the steel very much, and I very much prefer it. Before this came out, they released the Endura in K390. I picked one up. This, in my carry, replaced the Super Gold 2 Endura, which I carried for a very long time and was very, very much beat on and was rough with. I enjoyed that model a lot, but Super Gold 2 doesn't have the edge retention of front-end sharpness that I wanted in a model. Interesting steel, interesting carry, but it just didn't have what I was looking for. When I got the Endura, I started carrying it, and there was people that talked about the Rockwell that Spyderco was using for their Seki City K390. When the Police 4 came out, the Rockwell was very high on that knife. It was in the mid to upper mid 60s. When the PM2 and Para 3 came out in K390, it was a lower Rockwell, and people were critical of that. I got the PM2 and the Para 3. I carried them, I used them, I reviewed them, and I demonstrated that just because the Rockwell was a pointer so low or lower than what people wanted, it didn't mean that the performance was bad. It didn't mean that the steel wasn't amazing. And I have been extremely pleased with those models. The Police 4 didn't make it in my pocket all that much. It was a little bit too big for carry. Anything past an Endura at this point for me is a little bit too much. Just my own personal view of carry. So when these came out, there was a lot of question as to what was Spyderco going to do with the Rockwell. I have heard about these testing at 65 and a few other values, but they seem to be above the Para 2 and Para 3 that came out. I haven't had them Rockwell tested. I don't know for myself. What I will say is I have been doing qualitative edge retention testing with the Endura. What I've always done in the past was quantitative edge retention testing. So looking for a numerical difference, looking for something that you can put a mathematical comparison to. With qualitative testing, it's a little bit different. I've been testing the front end sharpness to see if it would hang around the same way it did on the Para 2 and the Para 3. mainly cutting different kinds of material, seatbelt material, plastic, wood, that kind of thing, and doing it all in sequence and recording it and then seeing if the hair whittling edge hung around. What I found is good results. The knife is holding up very well. I have recorded that, and I'm not going to include that in this video, but I'll post it unlisted, and I'll put a link in the description of this video. So if you want to go back and follow the link and look at what that testing looks like. The video is rough. It was more for my own personal filing cabinet of data in my head on how the knife was holding up, and just to see. I've done it over and over again repeatedly with this knife, and again found very good results. I'm not overly concerned with these models and what the Rockwell is landing at and making arguments about 1 point this way or 1 point that way. What I can say is Spyderco is doing very good with the heat treat on these K390 models. Rockwell aside, the knives are coming out very good and the performance is very good. So for the people who want to sit around on the internet and argue about Rockwell hardness and what they'd like to see and this, that, and the other, you can have that. I'm not concerned with that. I'm concerned with these doing good, and they are. Quite frankly, I think that K390 is the steel that we should be seeing on these models. I think it's the steel that we deserve to be seeing on these models, and I think Spyderco is doing an excellent job with it. In getting the knife, the quality felt good. There was a couple screws that could have been tightened down. That's fine. It was the same thing with the Endura. I'm not concerned with it. These, for me, are workers, and a couple of screws needing to be checked is no big deal. These knives are not costing that much, and the performance you get from them is, for my uses, is through the roof. So I'm happy with it. This knife, like I said, it fills a gap in between the Delica and the Endura. At first, that was all I gave it credit for. I thought they just looked at it and said, hey, let's just throw something in there in the mix. And that was fine, and that's a fine assessment. I think it deserves a little more credit than that, but we'll get to that. Ergonomically, the knife is good. The amount of handle space you've got is good. Blade length is fine. It is a deeper blade, edge to spine, than it may be it's a little bit deeper than the Endura, and it's got more belly. That's something that stands out to me. The belly on this almost makes me think of the Chef without being as exaggerated as the Chef is. Definitely seems like more than the Endura had, and I like that aspect of it. The tip drops down. I like that too. I think that's a nice piece of the design. So the size seems good. I like the blade. Good ergonomics. I picked up both these models from River's Edge Cutlery. There was no issues there. River's Edge is one of my favorite places to buy from. So I'd like to say there was no problems in shipping, but this was around, I ordered around the 1st of December with this knife, and I had to wait and wait. It sat at a post office for 10 days before it moved. With the knife sitting there, I didn't freak out. I reached out to Brian from River's Edge Cutlery. He said, hey, look, everybody's experiencing these problems. I said, you know what? No worries. We'll wait it out. I didn't post about it or throw a fit online. I just waited. The knife showed up. There was no issue beyond that. Everything in the mail is held up right now. 2020, Christmas time. Everything is a mess. Had nothing to do with River's Edge. So, so that was what it was. I got the knife, and I like it. Right off the bat, I like it. It's fine. I wanted to do some cutting for this video, and in the process of doing the cutting, I really, the knife surprised me. The edge on it was very good. The edges Spyderco is doing right now, especially on K390, are good. It's a nice low angled edge bevel. They micro bevel the knives. Both this and the Endura were just below hair whittling. So fine, that is what it is. In doing the cutting, I'm often rough with the knives. Whenever I'm doing a review and I'm doing cutting with the factory edge, I'm looking to see if I can chip the blade. You hear a whole lot right now online about burnt edges. Anytime somebody chips an edge and it's the factory edge, you get 20 guys who get in the comments and say, oh, you had burnt edge. I don't think that that's a fair assessment. I think that burnt edges can happen from the factory. I don't think that it's every knife. Now, what I will say is a hand sharpened edge is going to be stronger than a factory edge. And that's it. That's all there is to it. Even more so, a freehand sharpened edge is going to be stronger than an edge from a guided system. The reasoning behind that is a level of convexity in the edge. Now, I still stand by the assessment that I've always had, that a freehand sharpened knife, that freehand sharpening does not cause a convex edge. It doesn't. Not in and of itself. The human error in movement, if you will, is what causes convexity in the edge. You can make whatever arguments you want. Quite frankly, with any system, you're going to have some level of convexity there if you look at it on a small enough scale. It really doesn't matter to me at this point. I don't care. I have shown edges that were sharpened freehand that to find convexity in them, you'd have to really, really, really look hard. So fine, it is what it is. At this point, I embrace it. I allow it to convex a little bit. It adds strength to the edge. This is something that me and Big Brown Bear have discussed at length. You know, he's a freehand sharpener, and he's used guided systems, and he has seen for himself. And we've, like I said, we've had discussions about it, about the difference in the strength of the edge going freehand to guided system. And I'm not knocking on the guys who use guided systems. Guided systems are great. If that's your thing, absolutely use it, love it. I'm just saying, when there's a degree of convexity in the edge, it adds some strength to it. And again, at this point, it's something that I kind of embrace. It doesn't matter to me any additional obtuseness to it. The edges are coming up so sharp for me that they take a hair and a half on contact. So I'm not worried about that argument either. But using the factory edge and going into the cutting on this, I started on cardboard and I was zipping right through it. That was no problem. I expected that. I expected for the cardboard to be no problem at all. After the cardboard, I moved on to plastic strapping, heavy plastic strapping. This was more of a test for the edge. I was seeing what I could come up with. I was seeing, I've had times where plastic has rolled an edge or chipped an edge. So I was looking to see if that would happen. And I had no issues with it. After the plastic, I moved on to wood. Now, this is what surprised me with this model. When I went to cut the wood, this knife just ate into it, just dug right in, more so than I expected. And I'm guessing that has to do with the depth of blade. I'm not sure what this is behind the edge. I would need to measure it with calipers. This is, at this point, has been sharpened, and it was a fairly deep edge bevel to begin with, fairly low angle. But the depth of blade, in other words, the amount of runway between the end of the edge bevel and the spine is going to determine how quickly the increase is on the thickness of the blade. I'm guessing that's what I was seeing on that wood. I'm guessing that's what surprised me and why it cut so well. So I was pleasantly surprised with it. It really dug into the wood well. It did a great job. Also, the ergonomics. I mean, after that cutting, the ergonomics feel 100% solid. No issues there, no concerns. It really made me step back and say, you know what? I really like this model a lot. When the cutting was done, I needed to resharpen the knife. Now, K390 is a high vanadium steel. There's a lot of vanadium carbide in steel. Because of that, I'm doing all diamond with this sharpening to avoid, if you want to say, carbide tear out or problems with the carbide, or however you want to define it. So to start, I started with a coarse DMT, started taking the edge completely off the knife, drawing the edge directly into the stone, which is something that I do every time now, especially with new knives, sometimes with knives that have been sharpened. Some steels, it seems like it's more necessary. Super Gold 2, it always seemed more necessary, but then I was really rough with that Endura, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's a matter of that steel fatiguing more than others, or just the amount and the roughness that I would put it through. But that raises an interesting question, and it's one that I don't have an answer to. Do some steels fatigue from use more than others? And if so, what contributes to that? Maybe that'll lead to a good discussion in the comments on this. So started with the coarse DMT, cut directly into the stone. After that, there was a little bit of unevenness in the bevels from the factory, so I needed to clean that up, a little bit of reprofiling, reestablish an apex on the knife, bring it to a burr, move to the other side, bring it to a burr. I then moved on to a DMT fine. I worked with that, no issue, moving through the stones. After the DMT fine, I moved on to a DMT medium extra fine, one of my favorite DMTs. Worked with that, and I moved on to Ken Schwartz 3K diamond plate. Ken Schwartz 3K diamond plate really sets up the knife for what's coming next in the sharpening progressions that I'm using. After the 3K from Ken, I used Veneve 800 grit OCB. So this is Veneve's green 800 grit OCB stone. Worked with that, bring up the polish, bring up the sharpness. After the 800, I moved on to the 1200 OCB from Veneve, and then the 2000 grit OCB from Veneve. This is the stone progression that I've been finding to work best with K390, and I've been carrying a lot of K390, been doing a lot of work with it. I enjoy that progression very much. The diamond plates, if I'm using all Veneves, the level of convexity and having to chase that convexity all the way to the apex by the end of the sharpening progression can become difficult. For me, throwing in diamond plates kind of sorts that out. It gets you past that. And so a couple of Veneves at the end isn't as much of an issue. The polish comes up. Again, Ken Schwartz 3K diamond plate sets up the finish for a higher polish with the final stones. By the end of the 2K Veneve, the polish was up. The sharpness was up. It was hair whittling off the stones. In fact, I hadn't even done burr minimalization, and it was still hair whittling. So that's interesting. It could have just been a fluke sharp piece of burr catching the hair, but I thought it was interesting. After the 2K, I moved on to strops, working with a 1 micron diamond strop on leather, poly diamond emulsion from Ken Schwartz, and then a 0.1 micron poly diamond emulsion from Ken Schwartz. Strop made by Northwest Knife Guy on Instagram. Still using this strop. It's still great. I'm loving it. It might be time to pick up another one. Maybe have this one refinished. I don't know if Northwest Knife Guy refinishes the surfaces, but I might think about picking up another one just because I like this one so much. It's done so well and lasted so long. So excellent strop, excellent results. 1 micron and 0.1 micron. And at the end of that, the polish is up and the sharpness is up. The knife is simply taking hairs in half on contact, and it's difficult to get hair whittling footage, and that's what you want from K390. That's what I'm looking for. That level of sharpness at the end of the sharpening is what's going to provide the edge longevity for the front end sharpness, and that's the goal. So I was very pleased with this model. I was very pleased with what I saw and the sharpening and all that. I like it a lot. I'm really looking forward to carrying it. Looking forward to having it in the pocket and seeing what I find from carry with it. But I expect that the edge retention, the front end sharpness, edge retention is going to be very good. And again, that's really why I prefer the steel over a lot of the other options that are out there right now. I need to revisit Maximet and probably Rex 121 in that regard. Given the sharpening progressions that I'm using now, I wonder how Maximet would hold up with front end edge retention, which is an interesting question because Maximet absolutely has higher edge retention of, say, a hair shaving edge. But then the question of, what about edge longevity or front end sharpness? It's a thing in and of itself. So, and that's both with just carry and with using, you know, bringing the edge back on a strop. So, interesting knife, interesting model. I'm glad that Spyderco put it out. I'm glad that Spyderco is using K390 in the Seki City models. Again, I think that that's the steel that we should be seeing being used, and I'm glad that Spyderco is doing it.